Historian. Yes, indeed I am, and welcome to episode 5 of the 3rd season of the Space Quest Historian podcast. I'll bet you're all dying to find out what's been happening these past 2 weeks, and, frankly, so am I. It's been a bit crazy. People have been acting weird, and I don't just mean normally weird, I mean, like, Cedric weird. He's out there, he's doing something. God only knows what it is. And I can't tell anyone because who in their right mind would believe that a psychopathic, genocidal owl from the digital realm is loose in the world possessing people and causing mischief? I mean, you turn on the TV and everything just appears fine, but, I've been taping newscasts and the, commercial blocks and such, and I've seen these little brief flashes of words on the screen like, trust the owl, and your new master is here, like, interspersed in between the normal stuff. And the worst part is, no one seems to notice. They're just acting weird. Like, I caught this guy at the checkout at the supermarket the other day. He was making these weird, high-pitched, ooh, ooh noises, and then all of a sudden he fell to the floor, foam was spilling out of his mouth, and everyone around him was just like, not my problem. Well, then again, that is kind of typical behavior for Danes. But anyway, maybe I'm the only one who thinks this is weird, but I just have this sense of foreboding, like something awful is just about to happen. But anyway, that is not going to stop me from putting out a good show for you guys. I mean, hopefully people will catch on to this pretty soon before it spreads to the rest of the world. And you guys deserve some entertainment as well. And now you know what to watch out for. I mean, if he ever spreads beyond this little armpit of a country of mine, I'm sure it'll all work out because you guys know what to look out for. So I'm gonna keep carrying on doing the show as normal, and I'll let you guys know if there's anything else you should be on the lookout for. Cool? Cool. Because good things have been happening as well. The little Patreon empire of mine is expanding, slowly but surely, and we ran through another milestone goal not long ago, which means that I am now obligated to start work on the official Space Quest Historian The Adventure Game. And this is terribly exciting. This is something I've wanted to do ever since Season 2 over a year ago, and now it's gonna happen. To this end, I have enlisted the help of Josh Henry, our good friend of the show, whom you might remember as the author who read his fanfiction tale, The Search for the Two Guys from Andromeda, in the past season. I've enlisted him to help me hammer out a story, and he's already come up with some great ideas, so I'm going to keep you posted on that as the events progress. We don't, have a deadline or a timetable yet, but it is definitely a project that's moving. And as far as the whole Patreon thing itself is going, I'm really happy to see that, a small community is slowly building up around it. Ever since I started doing Patreon, we've had this little informal chat going on Facebook Messenger, but now that the whole thing is growing a bit, we've switched over to Slack for several reasons. The most important one being that not everyone likes Facebook Messenger. But anyway, this means that everyone who backs me over on Patreon is now invited to join in the chat, and we've been having a very nice time over there, chatting about all sorts of weird stuff. So if you want to get in there, all you have to do is throw me a bone at patreon.com/SpaceQuestHistorian, and you're invited in. There's no limit. It can be as low as $1, and you're still more than welcome to join in the chat. And we're also planning our first group hangout in the near future, so that's going to be fun as well, meeting all these lovely people, sharing a beer and a few giggles with them. So, enough shilling from me about that. 'Cause I'll bet you're wondering what we've got on the show for you today. Well, it is my great pleasure to introduce the two masterminds behind last year's phenomenal indie horror game, Fran Bow, Natalia Figueroa and Isak Martinsson. These are Swedish people, so I hope I'm doing that pronunciation justice. Probably not. Anyway, they'll be making their first ever podcast appearance on the show. Well, I say first. Others have probably come out since we recorded this. That was a couple of months, or a few months ago at least, but at the time we recorded it, it was their first ever podcast experience. So that's really special to me, because I absolutely love the game that they made. I even went so far as to declare it my favorite game of 2015, and they graciously talked with me for about an hour about, the making of Fran Bow, and, what makes good psychological horror in general. Yeah. Getting a bit excited here, so I'm tripping over my own tongue. But anyway, the edited version of that interview is coming up later in the show, and you can, of course, check out the full-length, uncut interview over on mixcloud.com/SpaceQuestHistorian. But before that, we will take another trip down memory lane with my good pal Jess Decaf Jedi Morrissette, and we've also got some more expert crowdfunding tips from Serena Nelson. In fact, why don't we just settle in and listen to Serena explain the importance of good communication in a crowdfunding campaign. So take it away, Serena.
Hello once again, and welcome to another installment of Serena's Kickstarter Corner. While preparation and making sure that you get people to back you is very much important in getting your game funded, it's not the end. In fact, that's just the beginning, and it's such a small part of the crowdfunding process. What's most important beyond gaining the trust of potential backers is keeping said trust. It's not easy and even more of a balancing act than making sure that you get them in the first place. Today I'll be talking about that ever-important topic of communication. While I'll go into more in-depth in certain topics later, this is important enough to warrant its own overarching discussion. Communicating and being transparent to a degree helps to foster your relationship with your backers. As long as you're there to answer their questions, more on that next episode, and even just engage in small talk in the comments, it means that you're there for them as much as they're there for you. Some of the most successful projects that I've seen have had the project creators not just post updates every day or two, which will be a topic at a later date, but also are willing to talk about anything and everything with those brave enough to venture into comment territory. In fact, that's how I was able to make lasting friendships with a good number of developers in the adventure game community and others. I've got to know who they were, what they wanted to do, and I saw the passion in their proverbial eyes that made it infectious not to do whatever I could to help out. This all separates the good project runners from the lazy or bad. The more you're willing to interact with others on a personal level, the more likely you are to make them feel it's worth giving their money to you. The adventure community have some of the most passionate gamers that I know, and with their proper motivation, they'll be right in the front lines with you fighting to get your dream funded. All you really need is to prove how passionate you are, and they'll be passionate alongside you. There's a reason that the adventure game revival movement sprang into being so early on in the Kickstarter craze. Some of the most memorable moments for me were the back and forth banter between fans and developers. Some good examples of successfully staying in touch with fans are infamous quests in their multiple campaigns, Agustin Cordes with Asylum, and most recently Jean-Baptiste de Clairfight with Lancelot's Hangover. And if you're listening to this, Jean-Baptiste, I apologize if I pronounced your name wrong. Anyway, there are too many campaigns to count that have been at least moderately in contact with their backers to some degree or another, which is still good. As long as you talk both during and after it ends, more on that at a later date, people know you're still there and care about them and their generous donations. Even a bug shows faith in your game. On the flip side, we've got what I like to call the fire and forget types. These are the project runners that put up their pitch and either don't stay in contact with backers or do it so rarely that they might as well be silent during the whole month. While not necessarily a major red flag, it is cause for concern. Someone unwilling to take the time to message someone back, or to drop the occasional update, or even to answer someone in their comments is probably a good sign that they're just there for the money to get their game off the ground. Of course, that's just speculation on my part, and I could be way off the mark with this. It's hard to gauge just why a developer is being quiet, but it still doesn't instill confidence in those willing to put their money down with your project. And then there are those who just do their own thing and completely ignore feedback from others. I'll be discussing this topic in more detail next time, but I've seen projects crash and burn very quickly when those in the comments section who know what they're talking about practically beg the creator to listen to them in order to get their project funded. Three of the biggest horror stories that I can recall in this regard are the Ill-Fated Sierra documentary that ran twice with pure and utter silence, Jim Walsh's Precinct, and The Seventh Guest. 3. For now, just know that silence is most indeed not golden, and current backers will voice their concerns before pulling their pledge and moving on to more deserving titles. Now, when it comes down to getting fans worked up, it's all about communication. Beyond telling us what you're promising and why your game deserves to get made, make us as invested in your project as you are. There's a reason why there's a comment section on each campaign and each update for your campaign. It's there not only to get feedback from others, but also to let others know what this project means to you. Stay active, be transparent, and above all, don't antagonize your potential fan base. Being ultra defensive when someone criticizes you is also another surefire way to get them to move on. Don't argue, but also don't give in to demands. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. A Kickstarter campaign is a full-time job for those who are considering running one. Whether it's for 1 month, 2 months, 2 weeks, you've got to constantly be talking with others, getting your word out, more on that later, tossing out updates like candy but not too frequently, which is another topic of discussion, and basically have someone spend as much time as possible making sure people are informed and happy enough to keep their pledges intact. The best interactors are the ones that get backers to increase their pledges, even if it's just a tier or two. Some die-hard fans will even be willing to toss down hundreds or even thousands of dollars to make your dream a reality, as long as you do good by them. The most memorable campaigns and the most wallet-straining ones for me were for the ones that weren't afraid to get the proverbial feet wet and huddle amongst the masses, so to speak. So, in short, keep contact with your backers both during and long after your campaign ends, and you've got fans for life. Some might even become good and close friends that will be there the next time you decide to dip into the crowdfunding pool for a second time. Those that just sit there silently working on their game without spending time to occasionally pop in to say hello are the most forgettable ones. Don't fall into the trap of staying silent and you'll be fine, I'm sure.
Thank you so much for that, Serena. Now, as always, do go and follow Serena's writings over on Clickist.com, and be sure to follow her on Twitter at intendant_S. I still have no idea what that means, but I'm not here to judge. Actually, I'm going to look that up. Hang on a minute. The title of intendant, French intendant, Spanish intendente, has been used in several countries through history. Traditionally, it refers to the holder of a public administrative office. I see. The title was used and is also commonly found today in many theaters and opera houses in Europe, where it is the equivalent to general director, a title given to an individual in a managerial position, generally having control over all aspects of the company. Okie dokie then. She holds office, apparently. I'll have to ask her someday what her managerial powers actually entail, seeing as she's no longer involved with Priapic Mountain, who... wait, that reminds me. We still have another cassette from Pete lying around here. We might as well give that a listen. Get some unpleasantness out of the way before we settle in with some deeply pleasant fireside chatting. Well, I don't actually have a fireside, though, so that's just strictly metaphorically speaking. Well, not metaphorically, it's more of a... I'm just stalling for time. Let's just pop this sucker in and see what random nonsense Pete Toleman, CEO of Priapic Mountain Games, has spewing from his hatch this time.
This really is the collection that sells itself, but you don't have to take my word for it. Allow the nostalgia of the golden era of adventure gaming to wash over you as Pete reminisces about his company's prime years with this clip from Disc 4, New Coke, $100 a gram. We join Pete as he explains how he wrote the script for Black Leather Cauldron in just 72 hours.
Black Leather Cauldron was sold to me as a heavy metal rock opera, a cross between an adventure game and a puzzle game. It was basically Loom, but with guitar licks. And to this day, I await the royalties from Guitar Hero from essentially ripping off my idea. Anyway, I wasn't happy with it just being about heavy metal, so I tried adding erotica to the mix to cater to my core audience. Problem is, heavy metal is gay. I mean, really gay. Long hair, leather, man-on-man action, no women. I mean, I don't have a problem with that, you know. I mean, the pink pound is as legal as currency as any other currency, you know. But, you know, even though a sale's a sale, dude, it is so gay. So gay. I mean, like, seriously, so gay. We were going to pull the plug. The butt plug, if you will. But we'd come too far. All the art assets had been produced and the script was fully fleshed out. Assets. Flesh. Problem was that a number of our artists had quit. Because, and I'm very sorry to even have to recount this, they were f***ing homophobes. They will tell you that it's because I didn't pay them for 3 months. But I knew the truth. I knew what was in their hearts. I knew that they weren't as tolerant, as enlightened as me. I mean, this was the 1980s. Some people weren't even willing to accept any alternative lifestyles. You should see what people said about vegetarians. I mean, I know vegetarians are fucking stupid, but, I mean, you know, people wouldn't even tolerate that. Me? Oh, I love the queers. Can't get enough of them. As long as they don't touch me. Anyway, as such, we ended up having to make choices about how we put the game together. We were going to have gorgeous hand-painted graphics, especially for the Hanover sex dungeon in the final scene of the game. But without professional, and I do use that term very loosely, without professional artists, we were forced to change the feel of the whole project. So, you know, we did what any company does when they're not really up to making a full modern game. I don't think I'm breaking any trade secrets here by pointing this out. This is what all companies do. If you can't draw, that's not a problem. If you're terrible at user interface design, don't sweat it. Can't compose orchestral music? Piece of piss. Go retro. Pixel art, keyboard controls and chip tunes. Bish bash bosh, you are onto a winner. At a very, very cheap price. Given that I was designing my game in 1988, we went back a few years. The game became a text adventure and it was loaded into your PC with punch cards. Although, given that most people didn't have punch card readers in those days, this did pose some issues. I believe that Amstrad Action did release the game in 1990, but you had to type it into the basic interface. You know, those things where you had to type in like 10 CLS 20 for x equals 1 to 24. You know the bollocks. Anyway, I still haven't received my royalties from when they did that. But clearly Amstrad are homophobes too. I mean, if you think about it, this is where Scott and Mark have gone wrong with their new game. I mean, yes, they did take over $400,000 from snotty little in their parents' basements who longed for the good old days of Sierra. It was a nostalgia kick. But they haven't gone for pixel art. They've actually put effort into this. They've got these gorgeous backgrounds, 3D sprites. They've even got Ken f***ing Allen in to do the music. And if there's one thing I can't f***ing stand, it's Ken f***ing Allen. But, you know, I mean, it looks quite good, doesn't it? I mean, the videos they've been releasing on YouTube actually look quite decent. I mean, there's a bit of innovation there with the driving the spaceship thing and the router, you know, the little dog. Actually looks quite good. Thing is, though, it's far too expensive, isn't it? I mean, they're gonna have wasted most of their budget on little shit like that. They could have released 8 text adventures for that money and still had a few days in Cancun. Amateurs. Speaking of, I spent a couple of days south of the border last month. Only I live in Britain now, so south of the border was a fishing village near the Havre. Not bad. Not great. Food was okay. Beer wasn't. Spent much of it watching Netflix, didn't I? Yeah, apparently orange is the new black or something. I didn't get it. Just some lezers in an internment camp. Laptop speakers don't work though, so I might be misunderstanding. Perhaps it's a modern classic. I wouldn't know.
Well, isn't that just fantastic? Okay, time now to cleanse our palates and take another trip down memory lane with my good friend, Professor Jess. So I want to take us way back here, way back to when I was almost like in single-digit age bracket, and talk about me discovering your website and thus beginning this online romantic relationship that we've enjoyed and endured for God knows how many decades.
20 years, literally 20 years.
Ooh, yeah, it must have been. Oh, yeah, it must have been around then. It was like 95 or 96 that I discovered the virtual Broomcloset and sent you a snail mail, like honest to God stamp on envelope with folding out letter type thing inside. Was that 95 or 96? I don't actually remember.
I launched the website in November of 95.
Must have been 96.
Probably very early 96. It was literally probably like 20 years ago to this day.
Okay.
We're recording this in February of 2016, so it's possible. Yeah, it'd be right around then, I would bet.
Yeah, well, that's a serendipitous coincidence. So yeah, and I vividly remember this because it did, like I say, fuel a friendship that has endured for 2 decades through all of my teenage angst and beyond. Thank you again. I remember vividly because I did not have internet connection back then. In 1996, the internet had just barely come out in Denmark, and I was still a couple of months away from my dad buying our first modem. So to use this newfangled thing with the Netscape browser and the dial-uppy, noisy type modem, we'd had to go to the local library and sit down. And of course, the first thing we typed into Alta Vista at that point, Google hadn't been invented yet. The first thing we typed into Alta Vista, my
Porn.
friend. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, because that was a public library. Although years later, I would run into a person at the public library who exclusively used it for porn, which was very odd.
Yeah.
Anyway, tangent aside, we searched for Space Quest. And up comes the virtual Broomcloset, which at this time is standard HTML 1.0. There's it probably wasn't an animated GIF on there that said under construction, but it was around the time when that was commonplace.
Yes.
Like a single page kind of affair, and I just immediately thought, okay, cool. Let's go and see what this email thing is all about. So we create an email account for me specifically so that I can write to you. Email and ask for your address, which you gave me, which kids don't do that today because that's just asking for trouble. But back then that was okay.
And also adults, if you set up a website and children start contacting you, you should just let those emails go unanswered. It's probably, just don't have anything to do with that.
Exactly. Because you were in college at the time, right?
I was 18, yeah. So.
Oh yeah, and I was 16. I thought there were more years between us.
No, not that many. Just a little bit there.
Oh, okay. Oh, for some reason I had you at like 5 or 6 years older than me. But you were born in what? 78, 79?
77.
77. My math is horrible. I was born in 1980, so. That's the only way I can figure out how old I am is just by counting like in tens. Just okay, cool. I am awful at it. Anyway, you did send me your address based on a single email, which I thought was well, I didn't think of anything of it at the time. I thought that's how the internet works, but down the line, that's very peculiar behavior actually. But it did strike up a very slow-paced but very meaningful friendship for me, and it ended up with me sending you 3.5 inch floppies in the mail, again, before I got my own modem, so I could send you files and with like text documents on it for you to publish on your website. And holy Jesus, the first time I actually saw my own name pop up on a website, down at the library, I was like, oh, this is like being a published author. And I was like showing my friend this, and he was green with envy, and that was an amazing time for me.
Oh, it was fantastic for me too. When I created the Broomcloset, it was still pretty early in the era of the web, and I had no idea if anyone would ever visit it. much less that I would, ever get a chance to really communicate with anyone who did visit it. And I'd had a few people email me, mostly with hint requests or requesting the solution to the data quarter puzzle in Space Quest 6 up to that point. But, this was the first time I'd really had an opportunity to talk with someone who, A, seemed as passionate about Space Quest as I was, and still am, and also B, someone who wanted to be part of the website itself. Yeah, that was really exciting for me, this idea that, you wanted to share fan fiction you were working on or other sorts of features for the website.
I was young.
No.
The whole fan fiction thing. I was very young.
Hey, I wrote it too. There's nothing to be ashamed of. We should probably create a support group for people who have embarrassing fan fiction still on the internet somewhere.
Yeah, we never took it down, did we?
No, we really should probably, or at least change our names on it. It was really exciting. This is, of course, before you launched Wilco's Domain, your own website. It was great having someone I felt like I could collaborate with. I'd never really had a pen pal before. The idea of sending letters back and forth to Denmark and, doing closed discs where I would share stuff I was working on, you would share stuff you were working on. Man, that was exciting. I mean, it's almost impossible to imagine in this day and age where, technology's rendered that sort of interaction almost comically, archaic now. But at the time, it was kind of neat actually having to, tromp down to the post office and, drop an envelope in the mail and then wait a month to get a reply back. No, that was fantastic. Really, in a lot of ways, I always tend to think of the beginning of that communication, the beginning of that friendship is really the beginning of the Space Quest fan community online. I think it's out of that the Broomcloset grew, and out of that the Subspace channel, our message forum, eventually launched, and out of that relationship that we've seen so many other relationships form. Relationships, again, it's ridiculous how many people from the Space Quest community that I met in 1996, 1997 that I'm still in pretty regular contact with today. And that's something I never expected to get out of my website, and it's really the most rewarding part of having worked on it. Is getting those relationships out of it.
Mm. Yeah, and we weren't. I mean, I'm not going to take credit for starting the. If it wasn't me, it was going to be someone else. I just happened to stumble upon your website before any of the other kids did. But we were kind of trailblazing. Not only was the Virtual Broomcloset the first ever fan site for a computer game, at least no one has challenged you on that one.
So I'm going to eventually just start calling it the first website and see if anyone challenges me on that.
Exactly. So we can basically just go ahead and say that the Virtual Broomcloset was also the first social media website ever in existence, because you did launch the Subspace channel, the message board, which became like a hotbed of. I mean, it was really, really active. You see SpaceQuest.net, the official Guys from Andromeda forum right now, and it's it's active, but it's not like something is going on every single day. And literally, it was hard to keep up with the Subspace channel back in the late 90s. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, we were getting like 30, 40 posts a day. And, like 5 or 6 new members, any given day. It was insane. Yeah.
So we had that going for us. I mean, I think only like games like Quake, which came out in, was that 96, I think? Something like that.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, I mean that obviously rivaled the amount of traffic that games websites would get, but Space Quest was probably the game series online that had the most followers. I mean, King's Quest obviously went up there because a lot more people played King's Quest for some reason, but Space Quest was first and had the most vocal fan community at that point, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's always been something that separates it from other games that maybe in a lot of ways were more popular with wider audiences. Space Quest always had that devoted fan community. I think there's something about the games, whether it's the science fiction setting or something about Scott's writing or Mark's art or whatever it is, that, maybe it didn't make as many fans as some other series out there, but man, the fans it made were dedicated.
Yeah, they were like borderline obsessed. I know that from personal experience. And maybe just maybe it's because it was slightly nerdy. I mean, it was sci-fi and it was comedic and such, and in all the ways that King's Quest wasn't. So maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. I'm not a psychology major. And as far as I know, neither are you. But yeah, it was really, really thrilling to be part of the earliest form of fandom, online fandom. And it was, for my money, it was complete happenstance. I literally just went on there, searched for it, and just thought, well, this is apparently what you do on the internet. You just email random people. And that's basically what I've carried on doing for the rest of my career, really.
It's not a bad method, that's how you make friends and influence people. If it wasn't for that early spirit of the web back then, me doing crazy things like seeing what happens if you email ken.williams@sierra.com just on a lark and getting a response back from the CEO of the company who says, sure, I'll sit down and talk a little bit about computer games with you, or crazy things like that. Yeah, seems like that was only possible for a really brief window in the mid-1990s on the web, and that's when the Space Quest Online community was born.
Yeah, and that was a fantastic time. And even though I launched my own site, it was Wilco's domain. It was a GeoCities site, and it didn't hold a candle to the big and the great one. And it was in my mind, at least, it was more of a companion website, like a sister thing to the big granddaddy. Obviously, we still collaborated, even though I had my own thing going. And shared interviews and stuff like that, shared contacts so that we could both interview the same person, and all this nonsense. I mean, really, it's staggering. Just being able to write to these people and have them actually respond. The first time that happened to me, I literally fell off my chair, and I could, because my dad had to print out all the emails, because when we got our first modem, it was expensive as hell to be online. So he had to print out and I was writing the Space Quest FAQ and getting a lot of emails.
Oh, I bet. I actually, talking about archaic forms of communication and making contact with the people who worked on the games. When Josh Mandel first reached out to me, he had visited the site and wanted to actually correct my coverage of his role in Space Quest 6. I mischaracterized it slightly, and he wanted to correct that. But the way I found out Josh Mandel had emailed me, I was actually at home for Christmas break from college and had no access to the internet. So I was calling a friend of mine who did have the internet while I was on break by phone, asking him to log into my email and read my emails to me over the phone, which again sounds like, the most archaic, crazy thing in the world in the year 2016.
Why didn't you just use your phone to check your email? Well, you see, it had a cord to begin with.
Yes, and it was very difficult to log into anything with it. And he was reading through the emails like, oh, you got one here from Josh Mandel, and I was like, whoa, that can't be right. And then he opens it up and he reads me this, and I literally this friend lived about 2 hours away. I literally got in my car and drove to his house so I could respond to that email as quickly as possible. It's like, I'm not just going to let an email from Josh Mandel sit around unanswered. I've got to take care of this now.
Yeah. and today we just sent the guy a tweet, and he will happily, come on our shows and stuff like that. I mean, the amount of interaction that's possible today is just, if you'd told me this when I was like 16 or 17 years old, my brain would have exploded scanner style.
Yeah, like someday it's like, oh, you need to call in a quick favor from Mark Crow. I'll just shoot him an email. He'll take care of you. It's like, that doesn't seem like a world that I ever imagined living in.
So that was a good time. So should we hop on to the next one?
Absolutely.
That was good. It really is quite calming not having Cedric around. There's no one to interrupt me, no one to repeatedly call for my gruesome execution or calling me horrible names. And if it wasn't for the fact that he's out there right now, probably making good on his promise to subjugate the entire human race under his despotic rule, I'd actually be having a really, really great time with this. I mean, the show is like on rails. Things are going smoothly. There's no interruptions. At this point, I'm kind of missing the interruptions. At least that would mean I knew where the hell he was. You know what? Now that I think about it, maybe I should be doing something about it. Maybe I should, contact someone. Show them what I've got. I mean, it's not much in terms of proof. I mean, all I have are, the past episodes of this show, where he's talking about subjugating humans and all that, and the few screen grabs I've got off TV, with the subliminal messages. But it's hardly conclusive evidence of like a hostile takeover or anything. But you know what? Maybe I'll do it anonymously. Maybe someone will take the time to check it out. Yeah. You know what? I think I'm just going to introduce the guest interview segments and then go prepare, an evidence package. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. All right. Tonight's guests, ladies and janitors, are none other than the twisted minds of Killmonday Games, creators of the very successful horror adventure game Fran Bow. And if you don't know about Fran, well, she's a sweet, helpful, optimistic little girl who may or may not have stabbed her parents to death. She starts her adventure out in an insane asylum where she is given some medication that allows her to see into the shadow world, where everything is distorted, blood drips from the walls, and demonic creatures are hiding out in plain sight. Her quest is simple: escape the asylum and find her beloved kitty cat, Mr. Midnight. But on that journey, she discovers that the world we inhabit is not so simple and whimsical as she would like it to be, and there are creatures out there who would like nothing more than to feast on our innermost nightmares. Sounds a bit like Cedric, really. Anyway, after 7 months of development in their spare time, husband and wife team Natalia and Isak took to a crowdfunding platform, Indiegogo, to realize Fran Bow and managed to raise over 28,000 American dollars, which was 8,000 more than they were asking, and thus realizing their dream of bringing Fran Bow to the rest of the world. And like I said, I was so taken with Fran Bow that I enthusiastically declared it my favorite game of 2015, and therefore, it is a great honor for me to be able to introduce Natalia Figueroa and Isak Martinsson.
Hello.
You go first.
What should I say? I'm Natalia. I'm Natalia Figueroa, and I'm the director of Fran Bow.
And I'm Isak Martinsson, and I'm the coder and musician of Fran Bow.
And again, for those of you completely in the dark, Fran Bow is... Actually, that's kind of my first question, really. Because I see it described as a horror game, first and foremost. And I thought we'd play the genre game a bit here, because it's not really just a horror game. It's psychological horror. It's got some comedy elements. It's got some drama elements. And, what kind of category do you put it in personally?
Well, that's actually a very complex question.
Yes, it is.
I personally had a hard time deciding this, because I feel like it is a psychological horror game because of the entire background story with Fran and what she's go through and what she feels. And, from a point of view of a little girl, I just thought that what she goes through is actually very, very terrible. So... But on the making also, being indie is all about being very spontaneous. So while we were making the game, it kind of got a lot of other stuff that, in a way, they just got into the game. Like the humor and the sweet parts, the friendship and all that. It kind of evolved with time. So, we kind of thought it was psychological horror in the core, but with a very changing kind of
Yeah, I know, because when you start out the game in the asylum, I mean, Fran has been put in there because she witnessed her parents being murdered graphically and horribly, and her psychiatrist is a complete and utter tool and is medicating everyone, and when she pops the medication, she sees ghouls and demons and blood and everything. It's very, That's very classic psychological horror. And then once you move into the middle part of the game, it becomes more fantasy, much more surreal-ish.
Yes.
Sorry.
It's kind of the process itself that Fran goes through, when you when you suffer from some mental disorder, it's not like always the same, especially what she goes through. That is this post-traumatic disorder. Mm-hmm. So it kind of it evolves. So that's why. Yeah. That's why it changed so much.
Now, you mentioned somewhere, or maybe I just read about it, that you actually had a background in films. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes, we have been making a lot of music videos and short films.
Animations, too.
Animations before we got into games. And this is what we both studied also when we were younger.
Yeah.
So like professionals too. Is that how Killmonday was started, or were you guys like a part of a bigger studio, or how did that work?
We were still indies then. We tried to make these huge stories that we never had a budget to make. So we had like what we call the guerrilla film movement, where you like made these helicopter moves by having a ladder and then jumping on a rope with a camera and faking the good shots.
Yeah, we have been always very like indie in all ways, like trying to put stories together with the super low budget and all that.
Yeah, and that's the nicest thing with games now, because there were so many stories in movies we couldn't make because it required so much.
Yeah, for example, Fran Bow, it was an earlier story that I wrote for an animation, for a claymation animation. So it was, we actually started the whole project. I was working like 6 months making dolls and all the props and everything. And then something happened
No, that's a cool story.
Yeah.
We had a set built up in a basement that we got to rent, and some burglars got in and just wrecked the set.
That's not a cool story. That's horrible.
It's not cool, but it's like no. 6 months Natalia had worked for hand with these puppets and sets, and some assholes just ruined it.
Why would you break into someone's basement and destroy their set?
That's something we will never know. So it's not.
Maybe it was fate or a random coincidence, but it led we made it to a game instead.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the cool part. It's like, okay, we didn't do this short film, and we did instead Fran Bow, that it became something that still today I play it and I still start crying because I'm so proud of it. It's like, oh my God, we did it.
Well, you have every right to be proud. I'm just imagining this burglar going into your basement and just sifting through all these puppets and strings and paper mache and just going, there's got to be a bicycle down here somewhere. There's got to be something.
Yeah, it's very bizarre, I think.
Wow, what an asshole.
Yeah.
But anyway, your background in film, so transitioning from film, a very linear medium, to games where you obviously have to have interaction, you have to have puzzles and dialogue and choices. I mean, Fran Bow is kind of a very linear story. I mean, there's not a whole lot of deviations. You can't go one way when the game expects you to go another, but you still have to, design puzzles and interaction and such. How did you feel your transition from film to game was? Easy or hard?
It felt fun to do, actually. The hard part is mainly that it's time consuming, and it makes you think so much that, that's so delicious for the brain, It's just fun to do. So that part just felt super. And we really wanted to do for Fran Bow a more shoes-based dialogue, but the budget really didn't... sometimes you have to cut down some stuff because otherwise you end up never making it, never finishing it, something. So, yeah.
So, who did most of the actual puzzle design? Was that like a shared thing, or was it the writer, Miss Natalia?
We work like I wrote the story and then the scenes and dialogues, and kind of at the same time we talked together and said, okay, this happened and this happened. What should we add here as a puzzle? And
it became like we talked about. Natalia came up with the scene that Fran is in the hospital. She has to get away, and then we just started talking about all the problems she will encounter on the way.
Yeah, exactly. And I really wanted to do something that was connected the whole way. Like from the beginning to the end, that is not just separate puzzles, but just very included in the story. So you don't feel like you have to kind of go outside the line of the story. And that was very difficult sometimes because some of the things you could just add an animation, and it's done. But to add actually gameplay or like puzzles, it's kind of, it's fun, but sometimes can be hard.
Well, there's a very difficult balance in providing enough interactivity so that the player feels involved, but and then scaling back the amount of cutscenes and animations and stuff. Because one of my friends was involved in a Space Quest fan game, and he will be the first to admit that the introduction sequence they had for it is notoriously long. It's about 15 minutes of no interaction whatsoever. I was like, 15 minutes. The screensaver has given up at this point.
Oh my gosh! No, yeah.
So I actually think Fran Bow balances that very, very well. There's enough puzzles to keep you interested, to feel like you're accomplishing something, but not in the sort of we're throwing this in here because there hasn't been a puzzle for 5 minutes kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean I really kind of wanted this balance to be something that I and Isak, of course, enjoy very much. I don't like to watch a game. I really like to be interactive in anything if possible. So that's also why, I also wanted to put these mini games in between the story to kind of make it a bit fun, and at the same time it has something to do with the story, or
So what are, for instance, my least favorite thing about horror movies is the whole reflection in the bathroom mirror gag. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, you open the bathroom mirror, there's nothing there, and then you close it, boom, there's a figure behind you.
Yes.
Usually followed by a loud music string that goes beep. You managed to steer very nicely away from the beep kind of horror.
Yes.
I think we share the same opinion on that. We did movies before, and we studied very much all these kind of cliches,
Mm-hmm.
and jump scares and all that sometimes feels too.
It's become a game to try to predict a jump scare now in horror movies.
Yeah. The music stops, and that coming a jump scare. Now it's coming. It came. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. When my wife and I watch a movie, if the camera is fixed on a person and they're very close up, but you can see some of the background, you're not watching the person, you're watching the background, because something is going to come running past her in just a minute.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I remember the best horror experience I had in a movie was the first time I watched the Japanese version of The Ring.
Oh my God, I love you. Oh, sorry, go on.
And I think it introduced for the first time the feeling of psychological horror, where actually it's the ambience that is the horrifying thing, not the creepy things. And
it's the things that aren't said, kind of the mystery in it.
The unexplained horror.
Yeah, because that movie just keeps you on edge all the time. You don't have a moment to sort of calm down, because I mean, once they put the cassette in, fine, you know that someone's going to get infected, I was going to say.
I don't want to talk about this. I will have nightmares.
But that movie is in my top 3 favorite horror movies of all time. Just for fun, what are your favorite horror movies? We're going to count The Ring as one of them. Can you guys name any other?
Will you start? I like this because Natalia is very bad at horror movies.
Yeah.
And she wrote a horror game.
So
fantastic.
Scared.
I mean, I have this imagination, I see a shadow and I'm like crying. Oh no, this is a monster, I'm going to die. I'm this kind of person that when I can't sleep, I really think something is coming under the bed and taking me if I have a foot outside the blankets or anything. I'm super like, I see everything.
My wife is exactly the same.
I think maybe it's a woman thing.
Oh, I don't know. Your favorite horror movies then?
So, I don't know. Oh, there's many. I like The Shining a lot. I don't know if you can call that a horror movie. It's more like mystery.
You definitely can, because that's another one in my top 3.
Yeah, I think this mental kind of just misleading reality. I love that. It's just beautiful. And what else?
We saw recently actually a surprisingly good horror movie called The Visit.
Oh yeah, right.
Oh yeah, I just watched that a couple of days ago actually.
I got pretty scared by the old lady.
There's something about old people acting very weird, but still in a relatable way, because when it's something unnatural or monsters, you know that it's a monster. You can kill it with fire and it's okay. But when it's something like so realistic that it could be like just a crazy person, it's something very, very creepy about it.
Yeah.
Or two crazy people.
Unpredictable behavior.
Yeah, that's the
people.
Thing. Okay.
That scares the crap out of me.
I agree. And in terms of horror tropes, Natalia, you mentioned the nightmare worlds and stuff, and that's one of my favorite horror tropes as well. Showing an alternate reality or someone who's not in touch with reality, what's real, what's not. That's one of my favorites, and I can certainly see that in Fran Bow. I mean, you only have to look at the screenshots to see that.
Yeah. I think that's like I said, this. Kind of seeing reality in a very disformed way is like, I love it. It's like a creation of the mind itself. So even though it's creepy, it's based in all your fears and all your past bad experience, or all that kind of stuff that mix together and gets pretty ugly.
Yeah. Speaking of good things in horror movies, I'm going to turn the mic over to Isak for a second and talk about... He actually physically did it. Did you guys hear that?
Yes.
And talk...
It is now pointed at me.
Yes. I'm very literal, I guess.
I just meant figuratively. I wanted to talk about the sound design, which is a very important part of any good horror experience, or really any experience, fictional experience for that matter, like in movies and games and such, but particularly in horror. And I've noticed that the soundtrack to Fran Bow is very subdued and very tense, but very subdued. There's not a lot of, even during arcade sequences, the music is always sort of very subtle and fluid, if that's something you can use to describe it. What made you do that?
I've never been asked about the music actually, but
it's Space Quest Historian first, exclusive.
Yeah. You should have heard the first soundtrack we made for Fran Bow. It took me like a year to make, and it was this very epic orchestral score I made, and it didn't fit at all with the game. And I remember we played the game with the soundtrack, and just never felt right, like the ambience. And for the alpha demo, I only had available some very old synth plugins, like 90s sound. That was very gritty and dirty sounding. So we just wrecked the entire soundtrack idea, and I made it all over again.
So
A couple of months before release, actually.
Yeah.
45 tracks, went back to the 90s sound. But the style of the soundtrack, we wanted to keep it very mellow and like in the background, because we didn't have voice acting, so we didn't want the music to become more than when you are reading the text, because that could put you off focus in the game.
But a lot of like old style adventure games, certainly from the 90s. I mean, Space Quest obviously springs to mind for me, and Simon the Sorcerer, Beneath the Steel Sky, and all these games that I like. They usually have very let's say recognizable melodies, like you can sit there and hum along to them. And with Fran Bow, it's more like it stays in the background and lets the visuals sort of come to the forefront. So I'm actually quite interested to say that there's actually an unheard soundtrack to Fran Bow out there somewhere. Wow. So really just playing the game with the soundtrack was what made you just sort of dial it back.
Yeah.
It was the feeling.
It was the feeling. It became the soundtrack was taking over.
Yeah.
It had to be a symbiotic relationship between the visuals, the story, especially the mood of every scene had to be right. And Natalia is very, very good at directing. So when she didn't have the feeling for a scene because of the music, she had like, no, I don't like this. You have to make something else. And then I got mad and I locked myself in the room and made a new score, and then it worked and we both were very happy.
So maybe there also was this burst of inspiration in that you had worked for a full year with the big orchestral score, and then like you said, was it like a couple of months or something up until the release date? So it was like full on inspiration. I just have to sit down and compose this.
Yeah, it took 2 months, I think.
Wow.
I made a couple of tracks each week. And it was very intense, but as soon as we found a sound for it, it became much more clear how the game should sound.
I mean, there's a lot of piano, and there's a lot of like little glockenspiel things going on, and there's not a whole lot of rhythm, even when the mini games, like when there's action on screen. There's a lot of did you draw any like inspirations from classic horror? I wouldn't call it like Carpenter-ish, but it's got more in common with late 80s or very early 90s scores. It's got a very X-Files thing to it, actually.
Yes, nice that you say X-Files, because X-Files was a very good inspiration, and also 90s sitcoms, Days of Our Lives. I find that music very creepy.
Yeah.
If you put that music in a weird scene, it becomes terror.
Yeah.
These over happy piano theme songs and bloody murder. It's a good combination.
Well, you're right, and it fits in with the main character as well. You've got these kind of childish melodies and such, and then you show blood and murder all around them. I like that juxtaposition that the soundtrack gives.
In the, I think on Spotify, and if you buy the soundtrack, the 2 last tracks are actually from the earlier soundtrack.
Oh,
I added them as a bonus.
okay.
So you can hear the orchestral sound a bit more.
You should put the orchestral thing on Bandcamp. I'm just putting that out there.
I could do this.
the lost soundtrack to Fran Bow. Okay, so let's get into the mini games. Because a lot of adventure game players, when they see arcade sequence or they see platforming sequence or anything like that, they immediately lose their crap because we've been leaning back, having a good time, exploring the world, and all of a sudden we have to have trigger fingers. Now, I play a lot of Space Quest, obviously, and Space Quest is credited for being the adventure game series that introduced arcade sequences in the first place. So I don't have that reaction to arcade sequences. I may get annoyed with them, but I think they have their place in adventure games. But what made you put like little mini games, arcade games into Fran Bow?
I wanted to have some kind of action. That's the main thing. And I wanted to also feel like there was some kind of different gameplay. And I wanted to add different art styles, and that's it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I did notice that the mini games usually took on a very different, almost more 8-bit or 16-bit kind of graphic, especially the jumpy thing. Once you escape the asylum and Remor is after you, the jumpy thing. It almost looked like a Super Nintendo game. Only, slightly more high res. So was that really just of a case of okay, we don't want the player to get complacent or bored, God forbid, just change things up?
I just wanted to get some open window and fresh air, in the eyes, kind of, for myself. And I actually, while we were making the game, we got some people so that asking. But can we skip these mini games and all that? And it felt like, yeah, of course, why not? So I wanted to make it mostly because I thought it was fun to do.
Yes, we were so close of not doing the mini games at all because we were running out of time.
Yeah.
So I think we made the claymation mini game in one weekend.
Yeah, it was so stressed.
I told Natalia that we don't have time, and if you can make it all in clay and photograph it and animate it in the weekend, then I can add it in the game. So she made it.
Yeah, I did it anyway.
Well, that's motivation right there.
Yeah.
But also, if you've got an engine going, I mean, you guys made this in Game Maker Pro, right?
Game Maker Studio, yeah.
Game Maker Studio, sorry. I've never used it, so I don't know what it's called. But anyway, once you've got, mechanics in, adventure game mechanics, and all of a sudden having to switch it up all around and make an arcade sequence, that's got to take a lot of coding time, I would imagine.
Yes, it did, but it also was a fresh air, because most of the coding for Fran Bow, it took me like a year or two to really get the engine done very stable for us to just add in stuff and change. But after a while it became more of a copy paste, click this item and walk here. So every time we had a puzzle that involved new mechanics or the mini games, it was like, yes, finally something new to make.
Yes.
Well, I actually wanted to, carefully ask about the whole being a husband and wife development team existence, because as they say, or who are they, the wizards, but they do say never get into business with your friends, never get into business with your spouse.
Yes.
Don't live with your friends because they might be all fun and games when you see each other at the office and then you get to go home, but having to live with them day after day, they're a very sometimes a toxic environment can spring up, and I can sort of tell also from reading Natalia's post-mortem of the game. It said that you broke up briefly during the development, and that kind of broke my heart actually. So how was the dynamic?
But that first part where everyone says that, I heard that too also when we started making movies together, that no, don't start making movies with your wife, it won't work. But you should never, ever, ever listen to someone telling you what you can't do.
Especially if they don't know you.
Exactly. Because we had this, what you call it?
Passion. Dreams.
The fandom, prejudice.
Judgment.
No. Something where you get into something thinking that, this won't work, but you haven't tried it. And we got into this with this in our mind that, but we're wife and husband and we're together all the time and now we're gonna make this all the time. This might not work.
Yeah, and when we were like about to break up, it was actually mainly because of the money pressure, We were so stressed out about not being able to pay our apartment and all that kind of stuff that we kind of started blaming each other instead of helping each other. And when you realize that actually you are the best friend, Isak is my best friend, and you see that it kind of changes the whole perspective of how you work and how you kind of do for yourself, because it doesn't mean that we are husband and wife, that we are all the time together. We also need time alone, and we
learned to have time alone.
Yes, and kind of balance everything. And when we work, it's mainly work. We really don't mix up our relationship. Sometimes we can hug and kiss and all that while working, but it's mainly to kind of when we do something good, like yay, we did it, and but to mainly keep it very kind of cold when we work, and then when we are free, normal couple.
Okay. So, well, I can certainly see that. You have to have some sort of detachment, because like we have to put this together, and then not monkey around or whatever.
Yes, exactly. And at the beginning also it felt sometimes that if Isak had some artistic things to tell me, or I said to him, we kind of were immature to take it. Like we got angry instead of thinking, like taking it seriously, like our work, how you call it, more helping each other. So I got all weird here with English. So,
hey, it's our second language, all of us. So yeah.
It's a lot of personal ego and pride that has to be taken aside.
Yes, exactly.
We're coming up on the last bit anyway, so if you have anything that we should look forward to and any closing remarks, let me know.
You say something. We're working on our new adventure game now.
Yes.
And we're very hyped about it.
Yes.
And it's where we take everything we learn from Fran Bow and try to make it even better.
Yes.
Nice.
Not better, different.
No, yes.
It's a different
better is
story.
not the word. Different.
Yeah.
Is it still a horror game? Can you say that much?
We won't categorize it yet.
No, because we like to kind of mix many things. It will have, of course, this kind of mysterious, a bit creepy moments that I really love, but I don't know if we can call it like a...
Not a full-on horror.
No, I don't think so.
More Stephen Kingish.
Yeah.
Ooh. I will,
creepy.
I will look.
Creepy, dark, but not horror like,
Oh, I look very, very much forward to that, because Fran Bow really warmed me up, and I will keep a very, very close eye on what you guys do in the future. So where can people find you guys, like on social media, Twitter, the web, and such? I mean, I know the answer. I just want to hear you say it.
Killmonday Games.
Yes, at Killmonday Games on Twitter.
And Facebook is Killmonday Games.
Yeah.
And franbow.com is our nicest looking website.
Yes.
One day we will have a Killmonday Games website also.
We hope so.
Yes.
We really suck at websites.
Oh, I like FranBow.com. It's very pretty. But then again, the art style of the game is phenomenal. I really, really love it. So,
Thank you.
well, that is all the time we have for the interview in this episode, but if you want to listen to the full unedited 1-hour extravaganza, as always, just go to mixcloud.com/SpaceQuestHistorian. And, of course, go play Fran Bow. It is an amazing adventure. It's available on GOG and Steam for your computer thingy, and also as an episodic series on Androids and iPhones. And there's no real difference between the two. It's just that the game was too big to fit into a single downloadable smartphone app, so they had to split it up into 5 episodes for mobile devices. But if you buy all 5 episodes, it costs just as much as the single game costs on Steam and GOG anyway. So anyway, I just said GOG and then I said GOG. What do you guys do? How do you guys say that? Because I've always it stands for good old game, so I always just go GOG because it's an acronym. But people have started calling it GOG, which sounds like something an orc would say as they're charging into battle. GOG. I know nothing about orcs. Anyway, while you were listening to all of that, I have actually put together a little care package for the authorities here, detailing the untold horror that's about to befall us all. So, I am going to sign off this episode and be on my way. What is that?
This is a declaration of a state of emergency. Please remain indoors and turn on your radio or television. Attention, everyone. This is a declaration of a state of emergency. Please remain indoors and turn on your radio or television.
Huh? What? What's going on? Okay, well, guess I better turn on the TV then.
It's important that no one leaves their house until the authorities have neutralized the threat. For those who are just joining us, I repeat, the country is in a state of emergency. All citizens are required to stay indoors and not leave the house under any circumstance due to a widespread terrorist threat. The military has been mobilized and a wide-scale counter-terrorism plan is currently being executed. We go live now to me, vile news-reading human! Remember this handsome face well, mortals, for you are beholding the face of your new lord and master! Those of you who resist will be utterly annihilated! I control all your country's communication systems! I control your electricity, your water, every facet of your existence! There is no escape from me, and you will learn to worship me! Now cower in fear as you pledge your undying loyalty under my rule!
Well, fuck this. I'm heading to the shelter. I suggest you all do the same. Bye now!
Maybe I should have done this sooner.